start off with Athletic Director Mark Harlan.
That stuff's harder than it used to be. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you guys coming down on short notice. It's just an honor and really kind of historic day for us here today to have Commissioner Kliavkoff join us here in Salt Lake. Got in last night. We had a great dinner. And then today he's had an opportunity to meet so many of our great staffers, our students, and even more tonight and tomorrow. So really honored that he's here. I go back to when he was hired. He reached out 24 hours after his hire to me to check in, and it's been like that ever since. Very transparent, very authentic, and just tremendous leadership. And as we joked, the athletic directors with him, since he started on July 1, absolutely nothing has happened in the industry. It's been a very quiet summer, so perfect time to start. So, George, welcome to University of Utah.
Thank you.
And certainly welcome to Salt Lake. So with that, we'll open up to any questions.
George, you had told me back in Hollywood you hadn't been on campus yet until you were going to make the visit. So now that you've seen it, what are your thoughts?
Blown away by the facilities. Very impressed.
And then what were your thoughts about the Pac-12 going 6-6 over week one? I mean, some head-scratching losses, but also some big wins.
Yeah, I was there for the UCLA-LSU game. I probably chose the right game this past weekend. Yeah. It was unfortunate how the North performed. I think we'll do better. We were coming off of a COVID year, and there are teams in our league that have played 3 or 4 games over the last 20 months and playing against teams that have played as recently as April. But still inexcusable to lose some of those games.
In addition to touring facilities, what's kind of the heart of the mission when you're on these campuses, especially here?
Yeah, so I'm in the middle of a listening tour. This is my 7th out of the 12 schools. I'm trying to complete all 12, and I will complete all 12 prior to our next CFP meeting on September 28th. And in each of the places I'm going, I'm trying to meet with all of the constituents, starting with the student athletes, but the athletic department, the faculty athletic reps, the SWAs, and also students who are not student athletes. And really it's about educating myself. I came with a lot of background in media and sports and entertainment, but not with a collegiate athletic background other than having been a pretty mediocre rower when I was in college. So I'm trying to learn what I don't know and have been getting great feedback.
Has there been a common theme on campuses from feedback from student athletes, from administrators?
Yep.
I'm sure every campus is a little different, but has there been any common themes?
Yeah, I think the common theme is great pride in being part of the Pac-12. That's what I hear from everybody that I talk to. The other thing is just what a tumultuous summer we've been through, and there are a lot of kind of unsettled issues that we're working through together. But there's a consistent message about collaboration, about getting through these issues together. And I think the small steps that we've made recently, announcing that we're not expanding, doing the alliance with the Big Ten and the ACC, I think have been well received.
You mentioned being really impressed by the facilities here. I'm just kind of curious, what all has your tour of the campus included, and what are some of the specific things that really jumped out at you?
Yeah, the basketball practice facility particularly is very impressive. This football building that we're sitting in today, very impressive. I think I've seen most of the facilities, including the ski house and softball and the lacrosse fields, and across the board I've been impressed. And I had the great honor of meeting Mr. Eccles at the football practice just now. I know how much he and his family have been supporters of the university, and every building that has his name on it is exceptional. And obviously I spent time at the stadium as well.
Do you expect the college football playoff going forward to evolve into a multi-network event?
I think it has to evolve into a multi-network event. The idea that we would have one network who owns all of the postseason rights for college football, I think would be bad for all of college football. We need multiple networks invested in our regular season, and the best way to get them invested in our regular season is to have them owning a piece of our postseason.
CBS is obviously losing the SEC package in a couple of years. Are they interested in the Pac-12?
I can't talk about what individual networks are interested in, but I'd be surprised if any of the networks, and I've spoken to all of them, wouldn't be interested in owning a piece of college football. It is the preeminent kind of sports property after the NFL. It's the second most watched sports property, and in a world of bundled media services, there's nothing more important than live sports.
Do you see the Pac-12 evolving maybe towards 8 conference games instead of 9 to play more intersectional games with the advent of the Alliance?
Yeah, the North Star for football scheduling for the Alliance, and it'll take us a while to get there, is having 8 conference games in each of the conferences and having 1 game a year against each of the other 2 conferences. So Pac-12 schools would play 8 Pac-12 conference games, 1 game against the Big Ten, 1 game against the ACC. One of those would be home, one of those would be away, and would switch every year. But understand that we're respecting all existing contracts and all traditional rivalries. And when you do that, it takes a little while to get there. The only thing that could really accelerate that in the near term is if we came to an agreement with our media rights partners to go from 9 conference games to 8, and the Big Ten did that as well. We could start as early as next year if we got those agreements in place, playing one of those games against the Big Ten.
What is the likelihood that might happen?
I think you'd have to ask ESPN and Fox for us. I think it's a very compelling trade to go from 9 conference games to 8 conference games and 1 game against the Big Ten. So I think it's likely that they would agree to it, but I haven't dug into that with them yet.
When you made your announcement regarding the Alliance, George, the Big 12's future was a little nebulous at the time. They've since made what appear to be some moves. How do you foresee, if those moves are made and adding 4 teams to become 12 again, that factoring them into the quote-unquote Power 5 world?
Yeah, so all of those moves are speculative. None of them have been announced yet, and I don't really want to speculate on what they might or might not be doing. I read everything you do about who they might be inviting by the end of the week, but I don't know the outcome of that. What I will tell you is that when we moved very quickly to make our decision about whether or not to add teams to the Pac-12, and then very quickly to announce the Alliance, one of the reasons why we moved so swiftly was that we thought that it would give some immediate balance to the Big 12 and allow them to proceed with whatever they needed to do, because we thought that the vibration that was going through college athletics after it was announced that Texas and Oklahoma were leaving the Big 12 to go to the SEC was not good for college athletics.
To what extent did the 2 of you talk about the
By the way, are you getting any questions?
No, this is
These
great.
are all me?
This is the best.
You can help answer this one. To what extent did the 2 of you kind of talk about the short-term and long-term visions of the athletic department here at the University of Utah? And I guess how can you help Mark kind of achieve that if that's kind of part of the purview of your conversation?
Yeah. Do you want to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's been great about this visit, but previous conversations with the commissioner, and another thing that he did is he had all the ADs come to Las Vegas really shortly thereafter your hire. Matter of fact, I don't even know if you were on the clock yet.
No,
That was in June.
It was in June, July 1st start.
Yeah, and he just kind of shut the door and he asked questions. Good leaders ask questions. And he asked us, what's the most pressing issues? And what he heard, I think, was we shared a lot of common of our concerns as a 12 schools. The challenges of how do we get to the Final Four and win it? UCLA cracked in this year and win a basketball championship. How do we get into the Final Four in football and win it? And what are all the things? Now, there's a tremendous amount, some would say 80%, or if you want a percent, on what happens on a campus to make those decisions. But then the conference has a piece to this too. And so we were able to articulate those things for him to plan when he got off and running. So, to have a commissioner, to have a conference that you were collaboratively together is so important. And when he brought us the concept, and I'm going to give him credit here, the concept from him on the Alliance, we just sat there mesmerized. Here's a guy who just got started and is coming up with an offensive play in an unstable situation to really align these 41 schools. And it's already working. We're already collaborating with our colleagues in those conferences and talking about the scheduling model. So it's been set up by leadership and for the ADs to now start looking into it. So those are all the things. To be a championship level conference, as we've seen in so many of our other Olympic sports, right, which is stunning what we win. But to get these sports going, it's going to have to be like this. from the center, as we like to say, and then obviously collectively here. But as I told him, University of Utah is honored to be in this conference. It was a special moment for us years ago, and having him here is really cool. It's cool for our student athletes, our coaches, and for myself and the rest of our leadership.
And then, Mark, to kind of piggyback off that, you probably answered the question a little bit. You obviously have some other, games down the line as far as in non-conference with like, Baylor, Houston, LSU and all that. Are you kind of shifting gears to how you're looking at the non-conference schedule moving forward? And does it have an impact on the BYU rivalry?
So to answer the first part of your question, we don't have an opening until 25, and I'll work with Merton Hanks and that football operations team under George's leadership and say, I look at that as that's an alliance opening, and let's see within those two conferences if there's a like match. If that's, prior to the 8-1-1 model or not, we have an opening. We'd like to fill that with an alliance member. Going forward, if we don't have the 8-1-1, we won't be able to do much. As I've said before publicly, you never want to be on the end of a phone call when someone says, I'm canceling a game. It's not collegial. It's not the right thing to do. And, oh, by the way, there's a contract. So from that perspective, BYU, as I've said, it's our rival. We have a contract out till, Rudy, 2030? That's our schedule over there. And we intend to honor that, knowing we take a 2-year break next year. They're in their chartered waters or uncharted waters that we're going to wait and see what develops, and then they may have things. And Tom and I will continue to discuss what makes sense going forward for obviously for me, for the University of Utah from his perspective. But that rivalry is great for college football.
Yeah, outside of BYU, Utah has, my understanding is 4 Power 5 home and home series coming up. One of them is against the against the Big Ten, Wisconsin, and 3 of them are with the SEC. And I think there's an anticipation, don't know if this happens or not, that if the SEC adds Texas and Oklahoma, that they're going to want to go to more conference games, and that some of their teams may want to get out of their longer term scheduling. So that might be an opportunity, but we're not going to break a contract.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.
One more, I was just curious, what about the future of the Pac-12 network? What do you see for it?
Yeah. So a couple things about the Pac-12 network. So the first is I think you have to separate out the production at the Pac-12 network from the distribution. So when I look at the production at the Pac-12 network, I've been in sports television for a long time. The quality of our production, I think, is as good as anybody. Really good camera work, really good editing, good voiceover, play-by-play. And we also do 850 live events. Next nearest conference network does a little bit more than 500. And after that, it's a little bit more than 400. So we're lapping our competition in the amount of content that we create, and we create great content. Where the network lacks is in distribution. That's a real problem for us. And I want to set our fans' expectations. I've read the contracts. If there was a way to fix that in the next 3 years, I'd fix it. I don't see an immediate fix to the distribution problem in the next 3 years. So I'm very focused on the fact that we're the only Power 5 conference that owns all of our rights, and that we'll have a unique opportunity 3 years from now to think about distributing all of that content in a way that balances several factors for me. One is obviously the revenue that that distribution will generate. Second is competitive advantage. And the third is just having our content all over the place so that we lift up the conference's visibility. And balancing those 3 issues is sometimes difficult. I'll give you an example. We sometimes play games, as everybody knows, at night on the West Coast. We're the only Power 5 conference, at least today, that has teams in the Mountain and Pacific time zone. So we get paid more to play that game and fill that time slot for our distributors. But we trade off, visibility of that game on the East Coast, where some of the Heisman voters and AP voters may be asleep at the beginning of the game, depending on their age, or the middle of the game. And that's a trade-off that we make today to make more revenue. We'll be thinking about all of that as we think about how to distribute the content after this 3-year window ends.
I know you also talked about the early kickoffs.
Yeah.
Is that something that is going to have to wait to come into play after the new media rights deal?
You mean like the 9 a.m. body clock kickoffs that we sometimes have?
Like you know, within the conference as far as any conference games that kick off?
So conference games, we can control the timing of that sometimes. Non-conference games, that's up to each individual school to schedule that.
You're talking about Big Fox? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah,
The
that
9
or
a.m.
even just, I know you guys were talking about, you know, having earlier kickoffs, have that kind of be a thing rather than always the 8:30, you know, 7 o'clock kickoffs,
Yeah.
having more of those, you know, earlier in the day.
Yeah, I think we're going to look at all of that as part of renegotiating the media rights when those come up in 3 years. And what I'd like to have is that balance between obviously driving a lot more revenue, because that's the revenue that we share with the schools, which they use to pay for scholarships, and also having the flexibility. And part of the flexibility is so that when I get to make decisions late in the season, I get to benefit our teams in football that are lined up for CFP invitations, and in women's and men's basketball, the teams that are lined up for an NCAA championship. I'd like to be able to create better schedules for them with more visibility.
George, you mentioned that you've now met all of the commissioners or the ADs in the conference. I'm kind of curious from what you've seen and what you know, what makes Mark kind of like a unique AD?
Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, deep passion for what we do, right? I took this job because of my passion for what we do for student athletes, and I see that reflected in Mark, and that makes me very happy. The other thing is 8 of the 12 ADs in our conference have been in their current positions for less than 5 years. So I think having someone with the hand on the wheel who's done this for a long time and who's done this in other organizations and other conferences and has that kind of perspective to think about what we did really well other places and bring that into the Pac-12 is unique and helpful.
Okay, everybody good? Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.